Tesla has been slowly reintroducing the rear-wheel drive Model Y, which has me kind of excited because I thought this was one of the best value Teslas ever announced, and they happened to take it away just a month after introducing it. And it has sadly not found its way back into the US market yet, but it first started in Hong Kong with a right-hand drive option, which kind of surprised a lot of people. But because Hong Kong is quite a smaller market and the whole city is, in the grand scheme of things, not that big for the range of even a standard range Tesla, so a lot of people were speculating that Tesla was okay bringing back the standard range Model Y just for Hong Kong, which hadn't gotten the Model Y yet anyway, so this was actually being announced as all Model Ys were becoming available for that city. And because the size of this city could probably get by with a standard range option, people were like, okay, maybe they'll just bring it back for that market. We weren't exactly sure where they were being built, but logically it makes sense that they would be manufactured at Tesla China, because that would require the least amount of work and the smallest amount of transportation costs. So making just one specialized type of Model Y simply for Hong Kong sounded a little bit weird to me, because Tesla rarely makes models that specific for such a small demographic. But Tesla China is adaptable and their factories optimized for mass production much better than Fremont is, with quality control and likely how many vehicles they can output at max capacity. So I didn't really think much of it to see standard range Y coming back for Hong Kong, but now that they're launching it for the rest of China, as of this morning they announced it starts around $42,500 equivalent in Chinese yen, which is a whole lot cheaper than the dual motor option that was the cheapest Model Y for a while. Makes me really excited for the future of the standard range Model Y, and maybe some hope that it could come back eventually in the United States, because I knew a lot of people personally that didn't think the Model 3 was big enough for their needs, and they loved the Model Y, and they didn't really care about acceleration or all-wheel drive, and they didn't even really care about having a range over 300 miles. They just wanted an electric crossover that had Tesla supercharging access, and the standard range Model Y was just a killer deal when they had it around. Started around $42,000, then made its way down to $40,000, and then like a few days after that price cut, they got rid of it entirely. We don't exactly know why. Elon Musk's response was that it didn't fit their standard of excellence, but the standard range Y they're launching in China has pretty much the exact same specs as the one they took away in the United States. The range is listed as higher, but that's because it's from a different standard of the EPA, and that Chinese standard that they have for measuring range is pretty much always showing much higher numbers than the EPA. So my prediction here is that if the EPA were to somehow get a hold of a Chinese-made standard range Model Y, they'd probably end up getting the same numbers of about 244 miles. So why Tesla says their standard of excellence isn't required for China and Hong Kong, I would love to hear some answers on. Hopefully this can be talked about during the next earnings call. My best theory as to why they're launching it in China and not in the United States is because the standard range Model Y is probably using lithium iron phosphate batteries from CATL, just like the standard range Model 3 that they're still selling in China. And I'm sure because of the manufacturing efficiencies and cheaper overall labor cost in China, they probably have thicker profit margins on the standard range Model 3 and Y, and those margins are so good, but they're unable to recreate that thick of a margin in the United States because the factory is not as optimized for it, and Fremont unfortunately does not have access to those lithium iron phosphate batteries that CATL is providing. Tesla has already signed a multi-year contract with them to continue supplying batteries for Tesla, so it seems like the relationship between CATL and Tesla is looking even more strong than it was before, and unfortunately they just can't get those types of batteries in the United States market yet. So maybe Tesla is waiting for 4680s to be a bit more ramped, and that's when they'll start reintroducing the standard range. And it's also possible that in the United States market, maybe because of driving habits or maybe simply the EPA being more realistic about range, Tesla sees far more demand than they know how to meet with the dual motor Model Y in the United States. And because they seem to be selling incredibly well, you know, they're sold out for all of the third quarter, and Tesla clearly cannot keep up demand for even the high price Model Ys. Maybe they see that as a reason to not keep the standard range Model Y around, because they're not going to be able to meet demand with those, and the margins on those vehicles are going to be smaller anyway. So if Tesla can only produce a certain number of Model Ys a year and they're barely able to keep up with orders, makes sense wants to only produce the high price, expensive versions that have been creeping up in price quite a bit. Now the dual motor Model Y, keep in mind that's the cheapest Model Y you can get in the United States market, starts at $53,000. So even if they were to launch the standard range Y in the US tomorrow, that would be over $10,000 cheaper than what the cheapest Model Y is right now. So I consider that a huge price decrease and helping people accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, because there's a lot out there that simply cannot swing a $50,000 electric crossover, and that encourages them to look at alternatives like the VW ID4 or Chevy Bolt and those kinds of things, which are clearly, in my opinion, you know, worse EVs with a worse charger network. But the standard range Model Y, I think, sits in a really, really perfect sweet spot. I don't think 244 miles of range is too low. I think the whole Tesla standard of excellence thing is bullcrap. That's probably just a cover up for them saying that they can't afford to sell that at extreme volume yet, and that's why they took it away. Same story as standard range Model 3 that was $35,000 and then off menu, and then they took away the off menu option. And I'm speculating a lot on my own part. You know, we don't know for sure if the standard range Model Y coming out of China uses LFP batteries. I just think that would make the most amount of sense if they want to reuse the most amount of parts they can from the Model 3 assembly line. If this is a standard range vehicle with a range lower than the Model 3, why not use the cheaper batteries that are able to charge way up to 100% every single day and supposed to have a really, really high cycle life, and Tesla has this really good relationship with CATL. It simply makes sense to me, and perhaps when Giga Texas comes online and is producing 4680 Model Ys, which I'm predicting will be just performance Model Ys at first, that's when Fremont will have the extra wiggle room to start producing the standard range Model Y again. So we might not see it until the very, very end of this year, maybe even next year. But either way, I think it's of tremendous value, and especially once you start throwing in certain federal tax credits, and China seems to be offering a lot of incentives for the standard range Model Y being below a certain price point. It just makes a whole lot of sense, and it clearly shows how the Model Y can quickly become the best-selling vehicle in the world within a matter of a couple of years. What do you guys think the strategy is for bringing back the standard range Model Y in Asia, and do you think that means it'll come back in the United States relatively quickly? Feel free to let me know down below. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.